Hey, don't ignore me. It's been a while, isn't it? I can't believe you're still alive in this era, with an annual income of $10,000. Just working at a burger shop doesn't make ends meet, right? She left me, thinking I was a low-income, low-educated man. I don't remember ever saying I had an annual income of $10,000. If I were to think of $10,000, it might be about the rent. Is this what a cultural festival like? I asked, and she concluded that I had only finished high school. My name is Chester, 50 years old. I work part-time at my brother's burger shop on weekdays. I had lived alone for a long time, so I could cook in general, and my brother always called me when his competent staff took days off. The rest of the time, I was either poking around on my computer or enjoying keyboard practice. My occasional pleasure was the irregularly held live concerts. It's been 3 years since I participated in a member recruitment at a nearby music store. Surprisingly, the band's first live performance was at my wedding. It was a fun time when I was engrossed in practicing for the band rather than preparing for the wedding. If I had been attending college, I thought I would have enjoyed practicing for the cultural festival in a similar way. One day, when I finished a live concert and was drinking with my folks on my way home, I heard a familiar voice. When I turned to the direction of the voice, my ex-wife, Catherine, and a man were walking arm in arm. I prayed to God not to notice me, but Catherine came towards me. I had known Catherine for about 5 years, and we started dating casually and got married 2 years later, only to get divorced. I cursed my destiny more than ever at that moment. I pretended not to know her. With an annual income of $10,000, just working at a burger shop doesn't make ends meet, right? I was a little tipsy, and Catherine's words reached my ears, but I couldn't understand the meaning at all. What's that supposed to mean? Your annual income. I was just talking about it. Did I ever mention anything about my annual income? To be honest, expressing my income through my job was difficult. It was because it had fluctuated greatly from year to year. After all, you just help your brother's burger shop occasionally, right? You mean, you don't even have an annual income of $10,000? Oh, who are you? I'm sorry. The man next to her chuckled. You're so old and have long red hair. Is rock and roll still the best? Furthermore, the man next to her burst into laughter and spoke out. I had a live concert. I dyed my hair for today. That old man's band, right? By the way, what happened to the self-produced CD? Don't try to sell it to me just because it didn't sell well. It's annoying. I don't have it anymore. I sold it off early. At the time when Catherine had proposed a divorce, our band had been involved in self-producing a CD. I remember fondly the time when Catherine, who was cute back then, had put illustrations on the lyrics card. Did you distribute the CD at the live venue? He asked while laughing out loud. We didn't have sponsors, and it was self-produced, so we couldn't make a lot of them. With that, aren't you in the red? With a low annual income? If you make a loan, you'll have to go to the other world. Don't come out as a ghost in front of me at that time. Catherine imitated a ghost's gestures. She was honestly quite beautiful for her age, and she looked younger, but I couldn't help noticing her age in certain ways. By the way, didn't you have much of an education, do you? You kept asking about what a cultural festival is like. So, you didn't go to college and just graduated from high school, right? That's why your annual income is $10,000. I kind of understand now. Education and income are proportional, except for a few geniuses, of course. She sure had the nerve to say whatever she pleased. I didn't know she was this kind of woman. Well, the first time I saw Catherine was at a casual restaurant I happened to stop by, and it was what they call love at first sight for me. Despite being over 10 years apart in age, that didn't bother me one bit. From then on, I visited that restaurant every day. After several visits, I gradually became able to talk to Catherine, and I eventually invited her to a movie on a weekend. After that, we had a fancy lunch, went for tea at Starbucks, and after a few dates, I confessed my feelings. Later on, I proposed, and I married Catherine. It was a remarkable achievement for me, the first since the time I had filled up the large venue with my band. What was so appealing about her, you ask? Well, she was petite and cute. Her loose-fitting attire at the bar was also enticing, and she had long, beautiful black hair, but most importantly, she had a radiant smile and was undeniably beautiful. To be honest, I never had trouble with women until my 30s. Being in a band made me quite popular, and I had my way with women. But despite all the attention I received, the one I really wanted to win over was Catherine. Now, the Catherine in front of me has brown hair just like the guy next to her. Come to think of it, I remembered something. There was a day when Catherine suddenly cut her hair and came back with brown hair. The next day, she left a divorce notice and her key on the table. I didn't understand the reason, but Catherine had changed gradually from the time we first met. When she left, I was down for several days, the first time since my band had disbanded. Since then, it took me quite a while to forget about Catherine. Why did she appear in front of me now, and with a man by her side? Did she leave because of money? She's been saying my annual income is $10,000 since earlier, but I didn't get it. I've been hearing it from earlier, my annual income is $10,000, right? Where did you come up with that figure? I saw your payslip, it was around $870, so I thought your annual income is around $10,000. I understand now. Catherine must think my only source of income is the part-time job at my brother's burger shop. There's no way that's true. With that meager salary, we couldn't afford to live in the apartment we used to have. How much was the rent for that apartment? It was $10,000, so you're saying my annual income disappears in just 1 month's rent? No way. The monthly rent for that apartment was $10,000. Wow, that's amazing. Remember there was a concierge at the entrance? They even helped us get theater tickets once. There was a pool, and I remember going shopping for swimsuits just for that, plus I used to go to the gym. Do you remember? Even though you always quit after a few days, you went shopping for workout gear back then, and when you were in a bad mood, you would always go to the sauna room for some relaxation, claiming it made you feel better. It seemed like Catherine was reminiscing about our life together, and I, while we were trying on clothes in the store, remembered her habit of asking for my opinion every time she tried something on. At first, I would give my input, but as time went on, I got tired of it and started giving vague responses while looking at my phone. She used to get angry and say, "Pay attention," and even her angry face was cute. I recalled how difficult it was to get her back in a good mood after those moments. I hate to bring this up, but if you are living with him, does he have all these things? Come to think of it, we don't have anything like that. Well, if there's anything, it's the exercise ball in the room. It's a small apartment, so it's quite annoying. Catherine said without thinking, glancing at him. He looked apologetic. By the way, is what he's saying true? Where were you guys living? Catherine pointed to the taller building while looking back. You know, the penthouse in that building over there. It was a hassle entering the building, and the elevator took forever to arrive, so it always irritated me. But the good thing was that, when I ordered stuff online, they could hold it downstairs, and I didn't have to worry about redelivery. That was convenient. That building is a luxury apartment where celebrities live, right? Then, there's no way his annual income is $10,000. I used to see celebrities in that apartment. Wasn't New York like that? Have you ever met a celebrity in my apartment? I have. He lives on the first floor. I forgot his name, though. That guy was an unknown comedian who hadn't made it big. He was kicked out recently for not paying rent. By the way, Chester, were you rich? I mean, I knew where we lived was impressive, but why did you have a delinquent-style car? And, despite being in the passenger seat, it was on the driver's side, and to top it off, I kept opening the door upwards every time. And, well, it's not bad to get attention, but having your picture taken all the time was quite invasive of my privacy. It really was rather rude. That's a supercar, isn't it? That's right, but now I'm calmed down. Could it be that you can't afford those noisy flashy cars with an annual income of $10,000? It's not that I can't afford it. That was a limited edition, and I had a friend help me get it. It cost around $2 million if I recall correctly. It was cheaper than I expected. Wait, $2 million for that car? Are you kidding me? But there were only 3 of them in America, and it was a hassle. Thanks to that, when I traded it in for the next car, I got some money back. I couldn't even fit my musical instruments in it. Getting in and out was indeed inconvenient. Also, I was always nervous about driving it, especially when dealing with bumps or going into grocery stores. What does this guy do to earn money? Is he doing something shady? I don't know anything about it. He's just doing part-time work at his brother's burger shop and clicking away on the computer at home. I already told you, back when we were dating, but you never believed me. I don't remember at all. Can you make money with an old man band? Catherine's voice became a somewhat sweet purring voice, and without realizing it, she had already released her arm from her guy. Well, I used to be in a band that had a debut. And I wanted to play again after a while. It's more like a hobby for me, but surprisingly, it was well received. We're going to make our major debut soon, but it still doesn't bring in much money. My main job is what you mentioned, Catherine, clicking away on the laptop. I mentioned a few well-known female groups. I create songs and provide them. I make music on my computer. Seriously? Was I unknowingly contributing to your ex-husband? I bought 10 CDs by that group the other day, just because I wanted to get their autographs. So that's why you were broke back then. I had no idea. Catherine and the man started bickering. Oh, now that you mention it. I heard about it. You said you create songs and provide them to pop idols. But at that time, you said it didn't pay much. At that time, I was just starting out. Now, I'm working on most of the albums. You can check it by searching on your phone. Most of the songs are credited to CT. That's me, Chester. Oh, yeah. Most of them are credited to CT. That's amazing. By the way, what kind of band were you in back then? The man leaned forward eagerly. Apparently, he used to play the drums in a school band during his student days. He claimed to have checked out all the bands he had heard of at the time. We were called Looks, but with the band boom during that era, I doubt you've heard of us. What? Your band's drummer was the best. I have all their CDs, and I even perform your songs at a cultural festival. Can I get your autograph? I'm not him, though. But I couldn't help reminiscing about the old days when he said that. You lived with an amazing guy. I'm jealous. I'd love to go to an old man band's concert next time. The man's excitement was at its peak. I don't know about that band. Did they become really popular? Catherine had never heard of the band. It seemed she considered it to be just one of those bands that only a few people in that scene knew about. Search it up. Our songs were used in car commercials, movies, and TV shows. We even appeared on the year-end music show. Indeed, our songs have been used in commercials, movies, and TV shows. Catherine should have heard them somewhere, but she probably didn't care about the song titles or the band name. As much as Catherine seemed reluctant, she started searching on her phone when urged. Now that you mention it, I did see that movie, Former Boyfriend, and that TV show too. I liked the theme song, and a girl I liked in high school sang it for me. Did you play in it, for real? I peeked at her phone. I created that song. Next, Catherine checked the visuals of the band. Are you the guy on the far left? You're really handsome. Amazing. Although you lose to the one in the middle. That's right. They were probably the most successful among lots of bands at that time. I felt surprisingly good hearing that. Are you kidding me? Because you didn't seem rich at all. I only cared about where to live and my car. In exchange, I didn't make things difficult for you, and I spent money on the places you wanted to go and the things you wanted to eat. At that moment, Catherine looked at me mischievously. Of course. You were the guy I chose after all. You have to have some decent accomplishments and character. With that, Catherine linked her arm with mine. That's why. I think there's a good person waiting for you somewhere, Rob. I believe meeting like this is fate, right, Chester? Everything around you will be taken care of by me because I'm here with you. Just like it was back then. What do you mean, Catherine? You're being noisy. Do you think you have something better than Chester? If anything, it might be creating new deaths. Even though I finally paid off everything, I'm fed up with it. The man remained downcast. I released myself from her arm, which she had linked with mine. What's the point now? I'm sorry, but I decline. I'm returning her to you, men. No, Catherine has chosen you now, so she belongs to you. Thank you for everything, and I'm sorry. Stop it. I only have one body, so we need to decide who gets me. Being beautiful is such a burden. No, we're not competing for you. If anything, we're just rubbing it in each other's faces. Catherine, do you even know what you're saying? Perhaps you're too full of yourself. Who are you to judge? Can someone like you, with a low level of education, comprehend what I'm saying? I may have only completed high school, but I don't think I'm uneducated. The man seemed to want to say something like, "What about you?" as he looked at me. I went to college as part of a promise with my parents when I started the band, but... What? Jester, you went to college, but you said you didn't know about the cultural festival, right? Weren't you supposed to have only finished high school? That's rough. When I was in high school, our band had already secured a debut, so there was no time for school. I was busy commuting between school, concert venues, TV stations, and recording studios every day. I barely had enough attendance, and I never participated in the cultural festival or sports festival. I remember we had to cancel our school trip because of a recording session. My high school days were quite sad. Of course, I couldn't participate in club activities either, and I only made a few friends. Right? It's important to finish college nowadays. Your parents must be wonderful. Got it? You need to disappear from my sight and go somewhere far away. Jester and I are going to soar through the world with music. Please fly away only by yourself. At that time, you will go with me. Why bring this up now? You left me because you thought I only made $10,000 a year, right? You'll come back to me as soon as you find out I have money. Isn't that a bit opportunistic? Don't be so mean. We just didn't know each other well enough back then. I admit that an annual income of $10,000 does make me think about the future, but it's your fault because you didn't tell me about it. I won't blame you, though. After all, we're going to work together from now on. It's not uncommon for divorced couples to remarry. Even celebrities have done that recently, you know? Catherine looked at me with that adorable smile she used to have. As I reached out to grab her extended hand, a familiar car horn blared. Sorry for being late. The weekend nightlife can cause traffic jams. Even this late at night, with 3 lanes and all, hop in quickly. All right, I can park here for long. By the way, is that a pickup? Who's the girl? She's dressed like a young woman, but she's not that different from me, is she? I had been drinking, and I had contacted her to pick me up. I quickly got into the car. Who's that woman? Were you cheating on me since we were together? I had been silent until now, but I couldn't keep my word. That's my line. I knew you were with that guy a year after we got married. He was young and had a thing for gambling. I believed you'd come back to me soon because you were just fooling around with a younger man, but you left. I'm done with you. If you were just blinded by a younger man, it would have been one thing, but I found out you were also blinded by money. Breaking up was the right decision. What? I'm younger than that old lady, and I understand you better than she does. Don't let that woman deceive you, Chester. You should realize my worth soon. Can you give me a ride? Catherine continued talking, but I ignored her and closed the door. She seemed to be rattling the door handle and even kicked the door. If you're feeling unwell, I apologize. Is that your ex-wife? She's chasing after us. When I looked back, Catherine was running down the middle of the road, chasing after us. After that incident, Catherine learned that the man had a massive debt. Catherine had to work day and night to make ends meet, but it seemed that her debt had finally been paid off recently. After a few years, she went out to eat and had some alcohol after a long time. That's when she bumped into me, who she saw as beneath her, and started provoking me. It seemed like Catherine was struggling just to get by in life. During that time, she had called me several times, but I had blocked her calls. Catherine had returned to the man she had left, but it seemed that he had not accepted her. At the live performance of the middle-aged band, Catherine's ex-boyfriend, who had come to see the show, approached me in the excitement after the performance. I didn't really want to know, but I was a little curious. After that, I didn't hear anything more from Catherine. Back in those days, right after Catherine left the house, there was a change in my assigned manager. My previous manager was replaced by a tall, long-haired, slender beauty named Marie. While we had exchanged audio files for the work I had done before, she insisted on face-to-face meetings for the handover. She arrived an hour before the scheduled meeting and was waiting for me in the living room of my house. I asked her to watch TV while waiting, but after a while, I heard the sound of a vacuum cleaner in the living room. When I went to see what was going on, she had started cleaning. I'm sorry. Did I disturb you with the noise? I apologize. No need to apologize. Thank you. Take your time. Is it okay if I continue like this? Do as you please. It was like this every time. So, I started to wonder, what would Marie do if I cleaned everything perfectly before she arrived? With that thought in mind, one day, I cleaned the room and waited for her. I was expecting to see what she would do, but there was no sound coming from the living room. Did she start working on her device as usual? Thinking that, I concentrated on the remaining tasks. However, after a while, a good smell wafted into the room, so I stopped and headed to the living room. I'm sorry. The food was about to expire, so I made it. Please eat it later. Maybe cooking for yourself once in a while is a good idea too. At that moment, I fell for the domestic Marie. Or rather, she had captured my stomach completely. I confess my feelings once again, and now Marie is living with me. The middle-aged band, which was originally started by old guys reminiscing about the past, is doing well, appearing on TV and being featured in magazines. We maintained our activities just as we were. It all started as a music venture initiated by middle-aged guys who wanted to reminisce about the past. We didn't want it to affect our main jobs. That's why we only had one live performance a month, making us a band that was hard to get tickets for and gaining popularity mainly through social media. I continued providing songs and even had a few million sellers. On the back of this success, the producer told me that their plan to form a few new groups was in progress, and I spent every day working on my computer until late at night. I also continued my part-time job at my brother's burger shop, and every day was both enjoyable and busy. One day, I was relaxing at home on my day off after a long while. I'm back. I worked up a good sweat. It feels great. Marie, you have returned from the gym. Sit down next to me. We have plenty of space, so you don't have to sit over here. I moved to a newly built apartment from the one where I had lived with Catherine until a year ago. I wanted everything to be new, although the rent had gone up. Don't be mean. It's already been decided that my seat is next to you. Hey, I feel like breaking a sweat with you again, Chester. She said that and rested her head on my arm, peering at me. Oops. I picked Marie up. I can see the apartment building where I used to live until a year ago. Don't you think you've put on a little weight? Not at all. If anything, it's a happy weight. Saying that, Marie wrapped her arms around my neck, and our lips met. I'll make you forget about living in that old. Where has my ring gone? It was a precious ring I inherited from my mother, which I always looked at when I was feeling down. It was a special ring with a big shining diamond. I thought I had hidden it deep in my cosmetic box, but for some reason it was missing from its usual place. I panicked and searched around thinking it couldn't be so, but it was nowhere to be found. In my rush, I headed towards the living room to search elsewhere. And just as I was about to open the living room door, I overheard an unbelievable conversation. I thought that ring with the big diamond would sell for a lot, but it didn't go as high as I expected. Yeah, but it sold for $2 million, so isn't that all right? Can't be helped. Now that we have $2 million, should we go on a trip? Going abroad would be nice. Sounds great. I was so shocked that I found myself letting go of the doorknob and returning to my room. Tom should know how much I cherished the ring and how carefully I had kept it all these years. I can't believe he sold it. Beyond sadness, an uncontrollable anger welled up inside me. I'll never forget this. Tom is my beloved son who I've raised with so much love, but I've decided to disown him. My name is Emily Johnson. I'm a 51-year-old career woman traveling and working all around the country. Recently, I got a promotion, so the frequency of my business trips has decreased, but I'm still living a busy life. My husband passed away due to an illness 7 years ago. He had always had a weak constitution, and after our marriage, he became a full-time house husband, supporting our home. There were various opinions from people around us about this choice, but regardless of what anyone said, I was proud of him. After graduating from university, he chose not to work and got married at the young age of 22, becoming a house husband. There were critical voices about this. Even so, I felt blessed, supported by my husband, and only friends who respected and understood our choices remained. Moreover, I was very fortunate with my workplace. Even though I was a new employee, the company allowed me to take maternity leave. Thanks to this, I was able to adjust my working hours for a work-life balance, and I could return home at the end of the stand-up working hours. We only have one child between us. Considering the fiscal toll, the first childbirth must have taken on my frail husband, who didn't have the capacity to think of having another. The three of us lived happily together, and neither my husband nor I wanted or sought anything more. However, when our eldest son, Tom, turned 20, cancer was found in my husband. The two of us went for a full medical checkup once a year, and that's when it was pointed out. Even though nothing seemed wrong during the last examination, by the time it was pointed out, the disease had already ravaged my husband's body. I've never regretted anything more than not suggesting we have those medical checkups every 6 months. His condition had already advanced, and at the young age of 43, my husband was given only 1 year to live. Hoping to spend as much time as possible with him, we decided to start chemotherapy immediately. There were side effects, and his inability to move properly and do household chores seemed to stress him, but he acted strong in front of us. 6 months after the diagnosis, at my husband's request, we switched from life-prolonging treatment to a more palliative one, preparing for end-of-life care. Desiring to make his remaining time as peaceful as possible, I racked my brains for anything I could do to help. The biggest decision I made was about our home. We originally lived in a 2 LDK apartment in the city center. We had already finished paying off the mortgage. It was a home full of memories for our family, but the view had been ruined by a new large apartment building nearby. So, I decided to buy a new house in countryside. Our original home was left to our eldest son, Tom, who would live there and cover the utility with his part-time job earnings. I also discussed with my company and got my job responsibility changed, eliminating business trips, shifting to remote work, and maximizing my time with my husband. If a trip was absolutely necessary, I'd have a subordinate go in my place, and I'd participate in the meetings online from home. Thanks to these adjustments, I could spend 6 months happily with my husband, and was able to be with him until the end. Tom visited once a week, and in the end, we both were there to say our final goodbyes. In the end, we only lived in the new house for about 6 months, but I continued living in the apartment with Tom while still paying the mortgage. 7 years have passed since my husband's death, and my Tom has grown into an adult and started working. Just him becoming a working adult was joyous, but he also met a wonderful woman, and they decided to get married. I was excited to meet her and couldn't help but smile. My eldest son's bride, Catherine, was a stunningly beautiful woman. I was amazed, to be honest. It's hard to say Tom is conventionally handsome, so I was curious how he won her heart. Apparently, Catherine pursued him vigorously. It turns out Catherine's parents had already passed away, and she didn't have much relatives she was close to. I suggested a formal meeting, but due to her strained relationships with her few relatives and her most solitary upbringing, she strongly refused. Feeling it would be too cruel to push her, we decided against the formal introduction. I want to support Catherine from now on. Seeing the determination in Tom's eyes when he said those words reminded me of when I first met my husband. Witnessing Tom's growth brought tears to my eyes, even though he had only come to announce his engagement. Not long after, Tom and Catherine got married. They seemed to be struggling to find a house that Catherine liked. Upon hearing this, I suggested they temporarily stay in my apartment. Given my frequent business trips and a home office setup, I felt living in the house where I spent time with my late husband might be a good change. Moreover, I wasn't keen on intruding into their newlywed life. That'd be a great help, thank you. Tom expressed his gratitude, but Catherine never directly thanked me. Still, I knew Tom was thankful on behalf of both of them, so I didn't mind much. A few months later, Tom paid me a surprise visit with an unexpected proposal. Mom, Catherine wants to stay here permanently. She seems to like the environment. What do you think about us living together? Live together with you and Catherine here? I was taken aback by the sudden suggestion. I was used to living alone and felt comfortable that way. The idea of sharing a space even with my son and daughter-in-law felt intrusive. Moreover, no matter how wrong it felt to think so, Catherine was still a stranger to me. The idea of cohabiting brought nothing but apprehensions. If living together in the same space makes you uncomfortable, what about renovating and making it a two-family home? Well, in that case. Tom persisted, and eventually, I agreed to the idea of renovating the house into a two-family home. Tom could only offer $6,000 as a down payment due to his savings situation. As a result, I had to take in a loan for the renovation costs. Should anything happen to me, Tom would take over, so I agreed to bear the other expenses. However, Tom's promised payment never came. I reminded him several times, and while he initially appeared apologetic, he eventually became distant, so I stopped pressing him. In the end, I lost touch with Tom. On the rare occasions we did talk, the atmosphere wasn't right to bring up the money, and the house was completed without him ever paying the promised amount. Nice to living with you from today, Emily. Likewise, Catherine. I'm looking forward to it. As soon as Catherine arrived at the house, she briefly greeted me and went straight to their side of the house. The lack of any talk about money or words of gratitude left me feeling uneasy. Originally, a single-story house, a second floor was added for my eldest son and his wife. Catherine had strongly desired that the living room be shared. The floor plan seemed a bit unusual, but considering that they would eventually live here as one household, it didn't seem too strange. After looking around the house, I called out to Tom, who was nearby. Tom, when I'm away on business trips, could you please help with cleaning the house? You're welcome to anything in the fridge. Huh? Me? Oh, right. Why do you even ask for such things, so bothersome? I was surprised by Tom's words. I had never thought of him as someone who would say such things, but it crossed my mind that perhaps Catherine was influencing him. However, I quickly dismissed the thought as rude and shook my head. Perhaps it was my oversight and I had unknowingly raised him this way. I had left so much up to my husband. There must have been aspects of Tom I wasn't familiar with. That's what I decided to believe. Regardless of what he said, if Tom would clean, that's good enough for now. I reassured myself with that thought. However, soon after we began living as two households, I regretted my decision to cohabit. The first sign was evident when I returned from a business trip. After being away for almost half a month, I found layers of dust on tables and shelves. It was clear that if even a simple cleaning had been done once a week, it wouldn't have gotten this bad. This meant that, during my absence, Tom hadn't cleaned even once. Hey Tom, you remember I asked you to clean while I was away, right? As I spoke to Tom at the entrance, he didn't respond, just looked at me and entered his house. Did he just ignore me? I was surprised and honestly shocked by Tom's unexpected behavior, even though we made eye contact. I felt uneasy seeing Tom like that, so I immediately knocked on the door to the house where he lives with his wife. However, even though Tom should be home, he didn't answer. Suddenly, Catherine appeared from behind. Oh, Catherine, sorry, I believe Tom's inside. Acting as if she hadn't heard me, Catherine brushed past me, unlocked the door, and went inside. Catherine's treatment of me, as if I were invisible, left me even more puzzled. Were they both in a bad mood about something? Their new life had just begun, and perhaps things weren't going well. Thinking I might be overreacting, I headed to my own front door. But soon, I realized my feeling of being troubled was justified. Huh? The door won't open. Believing there might be a misunderstanding, I tried to open the door to the living room, but it was locked from the inside. I could hear the two of them chatting happily behind the door. I tried turning the doorknob several times. Even though the sound of the doorknob turning echoed in the living room repeatedly, Tom and Catherine's conversation never stopped. I had to admit that both of them were intentionally ignoring me. Why? What had I done wrong? Despite pondering, I couldn't find an answer. Waves of loneliness and sadness washed over me, and I soaked my pillow with tears as I slept throughout the night. Dawn broke, and the situation remained unchanged for some reason. Tom and Catherine continued to ignore me. The uncertainty of not knowing the reason was unbearable. However, as time went by, my feelings gradually changed. I got used to this new lifestyle, and deep down, started feeling like nothing more than an unwanted guest. Thinking of my husband and recalling the times when I lovingly raised Tom would bring forth emotions, but continued to neglect to face those feelings. Before I knew it, all I could think of was how to sever ties with Tom and Catherine. I had prepared the necessary paperwork. All that remained was to go through with it. Even with everything ready, my emotional attachment and memories of a younger Tom held me back. But one day, an event occurred that finally pushed me over the edge. As usual, I returned home from a business trip, only to encounter an unthinkable incident. Where has my ring gone? It was a precious ring I'd inherited from my mother, one I'd always gaze upon whenever I felt down. A special ring with a shining large diamond. I was sure I had hidden it deep within my makeup box, but for some reason, it wasn't in its usual place. In disbelief, I frantically searched around, but it was nowhere to be found. In a panic, I headed to the living room to check elsewhere. But the moment I was about to open the living room door, I overheard a conversation that I couldn't believe. I thought that ring, such a large diamond, would fetch a high price, but it didn't sell for as much as I expected. Yeah, but we did sell it for $2 million, so I guess that's decent. I can't complain. We got 2 million, so why not go on a trip? Maybe abroad? Sounds great. Overwhelmed with shock, I found myself letting go of the doorknob and retreating back to my room. Tom should know how much sentimental value I placed on that ring, and how dearly I had treasured it. To think he sold it, beyond the sadness, an uncontrollable anger bubbled up within me. I never forgive him. Tom was my beloved son, raised with all the love I could give. Yet, I reserved to cut ties with him. I immediately sold the condominium I owned in the city. With the maintenance fee getting higher, it was a timely decision. Using that money, I purchased a new condominium for investment purposes. Following that, I also sold a plot of land where our two-family home stood. Though it was in the countryside, I originally built the house there because of my job, ensuring it was in a location with good transport links. Its value remained high, and I was able to sell it for almost the purchase price. I had been paying off the mortgage for that house ahead of schedule, so half of the selling price stayed in my hands. With the money I received from the sale and my minimal belongings, I decided to embark on a new chapter in my life. When leaving the house, I called out in the living room, "Thank you for everything." But the continued cold shoulder from Tom and his wife persisted. Their reaction was so expected that it felt almost comical, making me burst into a smile. Half a month passed since then. Since I often went on business trips, Tom didn't contact me, thinking it was just one of my usual absences. Fortunately, during that time, thoughts of Tom didn't bother me, and I was able to hire a lawyer and proceed smoothly with various preparations for the future. A month later, I finally received a call from Tom. "Hey Mom, what's going on?" "I received a notice saying they are going to demolish this house by the end of the month." Tom's voice was clearly frantic due to the sudden demolition. However, it was apparent that, despite making him pay for utilities and property taxes, he assumed he could continue living in the house even after I left, which made me leave involuntarily. "Why are you laughing?" "Of course I'm laughing. I was the one who paid for everything for that house, right? Whatever I decided to do with it is my business, isn't it? It wasn't just you living there. Why would you go ahead and do this without consulting me?" "What are you talking about? Acting all entitled without paying a cent? That house is mine. Do I really need to consult you?" Still heated, Tom hurriedly confronted me, but I calmly answered and brushed him off. Tom stumbled on his words and went silent. But his thoughtlessness just made me feel pity for him, and I could only sigh. "You didn't charge me for anything in the past 2 years, and now suddenly." "Of course I tried to bill you multiple times, but who kept ignoring them? If we can't even have a conversation, how can I bill you?" "But that's..." He seemed to want to counter, but no more words came from Tom. Silence settled on the phone line once more. Sensing his hesitation, I asked Tom if he was open to discussing matters. "Well, I guess maybe." "You were so indecisive." "I need to discuss this with Catherine too." Tom's evasiveness only made me pity him more, and I sighed even deeper than before. Hearing this, Tom, seemingly irritated, began to speak with a forceful tone. "I didn't want things to turn out this way, but Catherine kept saying you never really did any cleaning or cooking and was always slacking off. She said she felt there was no need to get along, and I thought there might be some truth in that slacking off." "Tom, you do realize I was working, right?" "Of course, I know that, but Catherine works too, and we share household chores." "You and Catherine are both working, right? Your father was a stay-at-home dad who loved housework. We discussed and decided to do what each of us was good at. Don't you understand that? Was that the case?" Surprisingly, Tom seemed completely unaware of this. I knew he was laid back and a bit oblivious at times, but I never imagined he was this clueless. It seems Catherine had been feeding him various reasons about how incompetent I was as a mother. Even going as far as to suggest that as a toxic parent, I should be punished. What shocked me most was that Tom had swallowed all of this without question. Wait, did I misunderstand something? I'm speechless. Just think about it calmly on your own. I'm busy, so goodbye. With mixed feelings, I hung up. Later, I contacted the lawyer I had hired and had them inform Tom and Catherine of the date and time for our meeting. On the day of the discussion, I arrived early at the agreed-upon location with my lawyer. Tom and Catherine showed up a little late. Catherine looked clearly displeased as she met my gaze. Look, I'm busy with both work and housework. You called me here. Can we wrap this up quickly? Catherine, stop it. Stop interrupting me. Reprimanded sharply by Catherine, Tom shrunk back like a scolded child. It became evident that, although he had grown physically, mentally he was still immature, making me deeply disappointed in my own son. That's right, let's discuss what we need to and conclude as quickly as possible. Maybe irritated by my taunt, Catherine's face grew even more displeased. In this tense atmosphere, I decided to speak calmly and clearly. You probably know this already, but that house is set to be demolished in a week. You've already decided on where you're moving to, right? Why should I have to find a new place? Both that house and the apartment, they are mine. Catherine shouted at me with fierce intensity, but I remained unmoved. It seemed Catherine hadn't fully grasped her position. I placed the documents and a copy of the property registry, which I had received from the real estate agent, in front of her. Catherine looked shocked as she glanced at the papers. Why? The house was supposed to be in Tom's name, right? I don't know what leads you to believe that, but the house has never been in Tom's name. Both are in my name. But it was supposed to be your husband's house, shouldn't Tom inherit it? Where did you get the idea that the house was in my husband's name? My husband, thinking ahead, had everything registered in my name. Catherine's face went pale and she fell silent. Catherine, who had been so assertive, seemed to have mistakenly believed that everything was registered under Tom's name. Of course, neither Tom nor I ever thought that. It is true that if I were to pass away, the properties would eventually be transferred to Tom's name, but that's a different matter. Also, about my ring which you sold off, I expect it to be returned in full. What? What are you talking about? Without any hesitation, I handed a document to Catherine, whose face turned even paler. Upon seeing the document, Catherine recoiled slightly, as if wanting to escape. Unexpected reaction. After all, the document was a sales contract between Catherine and the pawn shop where she sold my ring. How do you have this? When I reported to the police that my ring was stolen, they looked into it for me. What? The police? Catherine was clearly taken aback at the mention of the police, her face growing even more tense. Seeing her reaction, I replied with a smile. Yes, it was stolen after all. It's only natural to consult with the police. They should assist once I file a formal complaint. However, if I can just get the ring back, that's enough for me. What will you do? I understand. I'll find the ring and return it. Just please not the police. Both Tom and Catherine work at the same company. For them, as employees, getting involved in a police case would be problematic. Their company thrives on trust from other businesses, so if word got out about the theft, termination would be almost certain. Realizing this, Catherine seemed quite panicked. So, can you return it to me within a month? It's a treasure to me. Yes. Catherine promptly called the pawn shop to inquire about the ring. I thought it might be difficult since so much time had passed, but fortunately, the pawn shop remembered the buyer of the ring. Thanks to this, they were able to establish contact with the buyer. Knowing this, Catherine seemed completely relieved. But I didn't let up. I'm glad you found the ring. Now, about the compensation for my emotional distress. What? Compensation? What are you talking about? Shocked by the sudden revelation, Catherine's voice, filled with disbelief, echoed throughout the store. Had there been people around, she would have surely been the center of attention. Seeing the utterly flustered Catherine, I calmly proceeded to explain the breakdown of the compensation. I can't believe you're demanding compensation from your only son. I never thought this day would come either. It's surprising that one can't differentiate between right and wrong. Stung by the sharp words, Catherine hung her head. Even if she seemed regretful now, my determination wouldn't change. Having to buy back the ring, plus paying the compensation, even Catherine was at a loss for words. I then handed over a decisive piece of evidence to the married couple, Tom and Catherine. Catherine's face turned ashen upon seeing it, while Tom's eyes widened in disbelief. What? What is this? It's not what it looks like, Tom. This is. Catherine seemed even more shocked than before, struggling to find words. A natural reaction. The document clearly showed Catherine reveling at a house club. Catherine, what's the meaning of this? It's not what you think. This isn't. Catherine quickly denied it, but the photo clearly showed her entering a hotel with a man, leaving no room for excuses. Then, I placed a photograph on the table that captured Tom's infidelity. Speaking of which, who is this woman? Who's that man with you? Let's talk about that first. The couple, now completely different from just a moment ago, seemed to be in a frenzy, as if they didn't even notice my presence. Watching their pitiful display, I left a simple note saying goodbye and departed with my lawyer. It seems that Tom and his wife packed up and left on the morning the demolition of their house began. However, since they obviously had no money, they had to live in a much shabbier apartment than before. Although they are a working couple, they should have been earning enough for their living expenses. However, Catherine had gotten so into going to house clubs that she had gone into debt, so there was no way they had any savings. They seemed to be living a life where most of their salary is used for debt repayment and compensation. They considered divorce but neither had the money or energy, so they seemed to be still living together without separation. Despite the circumstances, they work at the same place and have to see each other daily, leading to nightly arguments at home. There's no love between them. And it seems Catherine approached Tom, thinking he owned 2 houses. She wanted to live with me so that, after getting married, she could leave the household chores to me and live freely. Catherine carelessly told her friend about this, which spread within the company, and her reputation has been steadily declining ever since. As for Tom, he's called a few times since, but I've been ignoring him. I had my lawyer tell him not to call unless it's through him. The compensation payments have been continuing without any issues. Thanks to selling 2 houses, I have money and am enjoying my single life. I disposed of everything except for mementos of my husband and keepsakes for my mother, and I decided to live in hotel rooms for long stays during work trips or vacations. It was my first time doing this, and while I was initially anxious, I realized that the hotel life suits me, and I plan to keep it this way as long as I work. Work remains busy, and I'm living my life traveling around the country. I was hesitant about losing the house filled with memories of my husband, but the memories remain intact in photos and my mind. As long as I have those, it feels like my husband is with me. Today, the sky is clear without a cloud in sight. As I gazed at the precious ring, a keepsake for my mother, I spent the day calmly by the hotel